You're listening to Ages and Stages, where womanhood gets real across every decade. 3 women, 3 life stages, 1 honest conversation. Each episode, we break down one topic, from relationships to career, to motherhood and identity, and how it evolves across the decades. If you've ever wondered whether you're the only one figuring things out, you're not. This is Ages and Stages.
Welcome back to Ages and Stages, where we talk about the honest truth, real life, real struggles, and everything in between. And we're your hosts. I'm Wendy.
I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Emma.
And we are so excited that you have decided to rejoin us for another episode. Today, we're going to be talking about starting over versus starting something new. With that in mind, maybe, few questions. Have you ever found yourself at a point in life where you thought, I need to start over? Maybe it was after a relationship ended, a career changed, maybe the kids grew up and they left home, or life simply took a turn that you never expected. Sometimes we look at where we are and feel like everything needs to be reset, that somehow we need to go back to the beginning and become someone different. But what if we aren't really starting over? What if we're simply starting something new? There's a difference between those two things. Starting over can sound like erasing the past, forgetting the mistakes, the disappointments, the losses, and even the parts of ourselves we wish we had turned away or that it turned out differently. Starting something new, however, allows us to carry those experiences with us. We don't have to erase our story. We get to build the next chapter from everything that we've learned along the way. So today we're talking about starting over versus starting something new, and whether sometimes what feels like the end of one chapter might actually be the beginning of something we haven't imagined yet. So let's get into it. And we're going to get into it by talking to Emma about, is there something that's happened in the last week, Emma, that you would like to maybe share with our audience?
Oh, just something small, and something small is on my finger, and I just happened to be getting married to my long-term boyfriend, and I'm so excited. I was not expecting it at all. I was so surprised, and I'm so ready and so happy. So yeah, that's new for me. So great. Now it's Lindsey's turn next.
Yes.
We'll see.
We'll be anticipating that for sure. Okay, so I don't know, when we think about starting over versus starting something new, I think historically maybe people do kind of get those things backwards, but I think they are, in fact, very, very different. So do either one of you have a thought about, what you see as the differences between those two things, starting over and versus starting something new?
I don't know. I honestly kind of think you're never really starting over. It's always starting something new.
That's an interesting perspective. Why do you think that, Lindsey?
Because, to start over, you would have to, I guess you could, but to start over, I feel like you have to really, no contact with people from your past life. No one knows anything about you. You completely change who you are. It's not necessarily just moving somewhere else or starting a new job, because you're still you. You're not starting over.
For me, I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to figure out what I liked and where I wanted to be. And I was so adamant on leaving where I am and my state and living somewhere the perfect place, right? I got fixated on this perfect place, and so did my fiance. So we kind of bounced around from place to place, and kind of like you said, Lindsey, we didn't start over. We still kept in contact with our families and some of our friends, but there is something to be said about being in a completely new place with a new job and completely new people and new grocery stores and the little things that you come to miss from your home base. So for a while there, we tried really hard to figure out what was the perfect place, and there really isn't. I found that out. I mean, there's pros and cons everywhere you go, and depending on your life circumstances. Like for us, it was the better choice to be a little bit closer to our support system, just because we want to grow a family. But and then when we were fresh out of college, we loved exploring like way out west in the mountains, and not a whole lot of responsibility. But yeah, it's definitely scary. It's hard to be vulnerable and be completely somewhere where you're not comfortable with. And you have to start fresh with your job and coworkers and friends. And I think as an adult, it's hard enough as it is to make new friends and start something new. But to do it multiple times is a lot. But I've grown a lot from that. I think I've learned how to adapt. Like I feel like I can adapt really well in a lot of different situations. So that's been a huge plus for me. So yeah, I wouldn't say completely started over. I still keep in contact with a lot of people, but I've definitely started anew quite a few times. But it's been good for me.
Do you think that, like starting over or starting something new is more frightening between the two? Because Emma, you're in your 20s and Lindsey, you're in your 30s. So, like has that perspective changed between the 20s and 30s, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. When I was 20, I was, yep, sign me up. I'll move across the country. I was totally ready for whatever. Now I'm like, no, like I have my house here. I have my job. Yeah, I'm good. I don't want to start over. Okay with starting some new things, but not going crazy anymore. Before I would have been up for anything. I might have been up for the changing my name and, not talking to anybody I knew anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am now too. It's more I'm at the point where I want roots, I want grounding, I want consistency, I want to have a base where I can build. I no longer have the urge to, restart. I'm happy where I'm at. But like 5 years ago, I would have same thing, like, yes, let's do it. Like, yes, let's go. I don't care where we're going. Let's just try it and see. But now it just doesn't seem like a good idea. It's a lot scarier now to think about that. What about you, Wendy?
I don't know. Like I think that there is this impression that when you get to a certain age, that you should have everything all figured out, that you should be settled, that life should, just be, you've set everything in motion, and, like it's just sort of like maybe time to coast a little bit. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I don't know if that changes because of just how people live their lives. Maybe it's because people are living longer and, we have more time to continue to live our life. I do believe that when you get older, depending on, like how your early adulting was, I think that when you're a little older, like in my age, starting in probably my mid 40s, I felt like I had more freedom. Like I had more of a career foundation. I had more money. I definitely had, some semblance of a place. I'm still in the place where I moved into when I married my husband. So we've been married for 20 years, like this year. And I don't know if I ever saw myself necessarily having this as my permanent space, but might be. I don't know. I mean, like, I think that that's the interesting thing about where I'm at in life, because we see a lot of our friends that are going into retirement, or they're closer to retirement, and they're shifting and changing and going to places where they really wanted to be. We've had friends move further up more north in Minnesota. We've had friends that have moved to the lake. We've had some friends that have certainly stayed kind of in their home that they've had, like most of their adult life. So it'll be really interesting to see, like what happens. And I think that that's the exciting part actually about being in your mid 40s or your 50s. Like you can start, having those discussions with your partner, with yourself, and figuring out, like, well, where do I really want to go? And some of that really foundationally, I think, is really fundamentally on what you prioritize. Emma, you talked about, the importance of family and support system. And Lindsey, I know that you moved from Illinois to Missouri to be closer to your parents because that's where they decided to land in their time of retirement. And I don't know where I want to go. Like we went on that Alaskan cruise with you guys, it was so much fun. And Todd, all of a sudden, like, he's just like, this is so beautiful. I think I want to move here. And I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool. But then we wouldn't be around any of the kids. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Well, and you have an interesting predicament too, because you have, your business, like a physical business, and you have your house that's paid off. Like you have all these things that pretty much ground you to where you're at. But it sounds like you're pretty open to trying something new. Does that feel like scary for you? Does that feel like exciting? Maybe both? Like, do you just would you pack up your business and start a new mortgage, or like, what do you think about that being in your 50s?
I don't know. Like Todd and I have thought about that. Do you really want to go into retirement, like with a mortgage? There are some people that do that and they're fine. Like we still have plenty of time left, like before we get actually to that actual decision of retiring, because this idea about having a fixed income is kind of daunting to me, so I haven't really spent time thinking about it. But then my story is very different than maybe perhaps, like some of my friends and their stories, because they didn't ever have to start over in their life, which is interesting. So, like there's starting something new and then there's actually starting something over. And I think that it depends on the circumstance, the situation, and what the person is confronted with. So I had to absolutely start over in my life twice, with 2 divorces. One was a little bit harder than the other. My first divorce was when I was in my 20s. And I literally walked out of that relationship with 2 things. Well, maybe 3 things. My son, Blaine, my oldest boy, a car, and then some clothes for us. That's it. I didn't really have any furniture. I left it all behind because, it was a little bit more complicated from that standpoint. There wasn't any abuse, but like there was just nothing that I realized that was mine to begin with. And so, like the only thing that I had was my car, my son, and some clothes. So I literally had to start over, from that standpoint. And then I rebuilt my life and got remarried. And that marriage lasted 10 years. And that one also didn't work out. And so that one was not exactly starting over, but it was starting something new because I had more things and I had learned, like to be more independent going into my second marriage. There were things that I had, like a career, and I had separate my own personal possessions and different kinds of things. Maybe that was, the lessons that I learned from having to start over. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I don't think that at my place in life, even if we decide to go to some place like Alaska, that it would necessarily be starting over. It would be starting something new, because we would be in a new space, a new place, and, just a different time in our life.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said too about relationships, like being dependent on a person. And then if that doesn't work out, having to start fresh. I mean, even like for me, like I've had the same partner for a long time, since high school. So we went through high school and college and early adulthood together. But there was a point in college where we split up. And I was just a complete, like, I didn't know who I was. Like, I had my own career ambitions and money and things like that, but I was so emotionally attached to him. So it was so hard to break apart and find independence. Like, starting over from a relationship aspect was so difficult, because you just get so comfortable with one person, and you put a lot of yourself into them. And after a while, um, you can't find where you end and they begin. You get so intertwined with the person. So I remember just being so distraught and so lost. And I was like, I have everything going for me. Like, I'm young and I'm in college and I have all the aspirations, and everything I wanted and needed was still there. But I just felt so off, because just for so long, he was my crutch. Like, if everything, blew up and went sideways, he was there. So it was always, so after that, after we broke up for a while, I just remember feeling like the rug just got swept under my feet, and it was so hard to come back from that. But in hindsight, I'm so glad that we had that time apart, because I met my own friends. I went to explore new places. I found a little bit more about myself that I liked. And eventually we got back together. Now we're getting married. So obviously it worked out, but I'm really happy, that I got some time to myself. And so I think if I could give advice to someone maybe younger than me that's in a long-term relationship or just feels that they're really dependent on the person, I would say it's okay to take time to yourself. Like, you're going to be okay with or without your partner. It's not going to feel like it, but at the end of the day, you're still your own human being, and life's going to be okay, even if it doesn't feel like it. But it's hard. It's hard when relationships you really depend on don't work out, like you said, Wendy. It's tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that gives a better, not even a better, but I guess a good insight into the difference between the two. Also, like the connotation you put on it. If it's something negative that's happened to you, you look at it as starting over. Whereas if it's something positive, you look at it as starting something new.
Absolutely. Lindsey, what about you? Like, have you had, like some of those experiences in your first couple decades of life, like where you've had both starting over and starting new?
So I've only ever had 2 relationships other than Ryan. I'm a monogamist, I guess. I was with my first boyfriend from 15 to 21. So that breakup definitely felt like starting over, because like Emma said, we went through high school together. We had all the same friends. We had all the same activities. So then breaking up, it's like, all right, you got to figure out your own life now, because we're obviously not going to be going to parties, hanging out together anymore. It's definitely a big, big change. And then I was with another guy for, I think, like 4 years in my 20s. He's part of the reason I packed up and moved. So, yeah, definitely lots to, and at the time I would say it probably felt like starting over. But now I realize that I was just starting something new. I was starting another chapter.
And sometimes there is kind of like that intermingling, that happens with that, because something that is negative and going on in your life, it does feel like I want to forget. I just want to disconnect myself from it. I want to distance myself from it, for a lot of different reasons. And then it actually turns into, like in the end, as it continues to unfold and you sort things out, it's actually like starting something new.
100%. Yep.
When you're looking back at things, because we're all kind of going back into memory lane a little bit, what is something that you feel like you learned? I mean, Emma, you touched on it, but what is something that you learned as a result of going through whatever it is that you had to go through, good, bad, indifferent?
I would say that it's just all part of it, like good, bad, or ugly. Like, the steps that you had to do, the do-overs, the starting news, like those are all pieces of your puzzle to where you're at right now. So I would say don't be too hard on yourself for the paths you've taken, the choices you've made, the restarts, the repeats, the coming back and leaving it again. Whatever you've had to do up to this point, it's all part of your story. So I would say just be gentle with yourself and, learn from your mistakes and learn from what you've been through and keep growing.
I would say just realize that, like, whatever the situation is, it's not the end of the world. Whether you are starting over or starting new, like, it's gonna be okay. It's likely gonna be a lot better too. So I think a lot of times we're really scared of starting something new because of leaving all those things in the past, but usually it's for the best. So give it grace and just do it.
Yeah, for me, and this goes with working with patients as well, because I work with people who are probably working through, like very, very complicated things, very, very hard things, very, very unexpected things. I've certainly been there in my own personal life as well, as I just mentioned. But one of the things that I have learned more than anything else is that we are stronger than what we know ourselves to be. It's really hard to believe that in the moment, like, especially if you're crying and you're confused and you just don't know, like where to turn or what the next step is going to be. It is very hard, like to see that you are a strong person. But these different situations that occur, like it challenges us to, I don't know, continue to move forward in one way or another. We have to. I mean, that's how we are by nature. Like I always tell patients, like if you ever question, like if life is moving forward, how did you walk into this office? Like, well, I walked in here and I say, yeah, did you walk forward or backwards? Do we drive forward or backwards? Like that would be really scary if all of a sudden something changed and we got in our cars and then the world turned backwards or something like that. The fact of the matter is that life is a forward momentum moving thing. So even if we've had some kind of tragedy or some kind of life-changing event that has happened, like you still get up and you still walk. And when you're walking or driving, it's a forward motion. And like I had to remind myself of that when I was going through some of the most difficult times in my life. I'd have to get up and I'd have to walk. And that did something for me because I was just kind of not engaged in the moment. I didn't want to be in the moment. I didn't want to deal with the experience, but there was something about just realizing and connecting to that forward motion that life was going to continue to evolve and unfold, and it was going to take a little bit of time, like to be able to figure that out. And I do believe that there's a lot of people out there that are struggling sometimes in big ways and sometimes in small ways, or, like even if it's a welcome change, welcome changes are still very hard. It's still, like stepping into some unfamiliar territory, like you were mentioning, Emma, like making moves. You were in your 20s and you just wanted to go out and live life. And Lindsey, you were talking in terms of, like in your 20s, hey, you were open to just, like exploring and being there and doing things. And, like, yeah, sometimes, like there's something about being young where, like we're probably a little bit more open to, taking risks. Like children do that. Like you guys have small little ones and they don't know what they don't know. And so they explore, they do things. Not everything works out. I think about AJ when he was learning how to walk, or even Tara, like how many times did they fall flat on their faces, and yet they would get up and they'd try it again, Good thing, because if they didn't, then they would still be crawling, or I don't know, you'd be carrying them everywhere.
Yeah, that would not be fun. I saw something today too, and maybe Wendy, you can articulate it better than I can. But for me, I have anxiety. I've struggled with anxiety my whole life, and it said that anxiety feeds on importance. So, like whatever you do, even though it's mundane or simple, like do it for fun. Like so, call your dentist, make a dentist appointment because it's fun, or sit down for an interview and have fun with it, or whatever the case may be, because and that just made so much. It was like a I don't know, a big moment in my brain. I was like, that makes so much sense. Like, because for me, my anxiety, it's always about like, you have to do this. It's up. This is important. It's life or death. Like everything is life or death, for me. Um, so it's tough to do things imperfectly, and it's tough to try new things because you want to be perfect at it. For me, at least, that's how it is. So just saying do things because it's fun. Like reroute your brain, tell your brain you're just doing it because it's something fun to do. So I did that today. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this email, this silly little email, like, and then it just takes the mental pressure off that's there. It sounds so silly, but it's so accurate. So I don't know, just making things less serious makes it more achievable. It makes it more fun to get to the end goal instead of, everything's got to be so important and your next step in life's got to be so important and final and complete and you can't slip up. And I was like, what if we just have fun with it? What if we just let it happen? And I think when you're starting something new, that's a good mentality to go into it. Don't be so serious all the time. That's helped me. I don't know, Wendy, maybe you can articulate that better, but I saw that today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a really good intervention. It's learning how to look at something differently that's not so intimidating. And yet anxiety within itself is based on fear, and it catastrophizes things. And it always looks at the worst case scenario that could possibly be the outcome, like of whatever situation it is. And because anxiety is a mind-body experience, especially, like when it's connected to emotions and it's connected to thought and it's connected to behavior. So, like how it plays itself out in the environment. There's a lot of different aspects to anxiety, but, perfectionism, plays a big part of people who are anxious. And of course, if you sit back and think about, well, okay, so how is anxiety and perfectionism, connected to one another? And it's really about, because if I'm perfect, then there's not going to be any mistakes. There's not going to be any problems. There's, like, I'm going to think everything out. I'm going to have a plan. And ultimately, it's about feeling like there's some element of control, because anxiety internally makes somebody feel like there is no control. And then it connects to everything on the outside of us. And come on, the reality is that really no one has control over the outside of ourselves. So when you have a feeling that you're not in control internally, and it connects to the fact that you really are not in control externally, it creates kind of like an emotional dilemma in the mind. So, like it's all about avoidance. And then we do these different kinds of things, like we try and become perfect. We have these high expectations on ourselves as a way of trying to come up with, all right, like if I can achieve that, which is hard to achieve, who can be perfect? I'm an imperfect person. But yeah, there's all kinds of different interventions that are out there that are very, very effective. And I love the fact that if you can just hold on to not being so serious, or, like having fun with it, instead of holding on to that, that scary part that is always a part of anxiety. Not that it always is in line with a physical danger. It could be an emotional danger too, which is, like even a little bit more complex. Lindsey, what is your thought about that?
I actually love it. And you're right. It makes so much sense, because I always tell the girls and stuff, I'm like, if you go into work thinking you're going to have a crappy day, you're probably going to have a crappy day. So why wouldn't that apply to other things? Like if I go into this being anxious about it, instead of thinking of it as, something fun or silly or easy to do, then yeah, it's probably going to be stressful. So if you just try to change your mindset before you do it and be like, all right, let's make this fun and enjoyable, might be a little bit easier. I'm going to start trying it.
Well, there you go. And, like I do have a little bit of a disclaimer, because it sounds super easy, but it is a little bit of a challenge. So don't get too discouraged if you try and just like have fun with it, or you try and change your attitude, and all of a sudden, like anxiety decides that it's not going to let go, because sometimes it's not going to, let go. It just won't do that. And the only thing that I can invite and encourage anybody to do is to continue to stay the course. Don't give up. It may not work out in accordance to what you want or in accordance to your plan, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's ineffective. There's lots and lots of different, sometimes, like I had a patient that I worked with that had a fear of birds, and she actually went to a hypnotist and then gave me some feedback of what the hypnotist did. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. What the hypnotist did is had her visualize that the birds were actually cartoon characters, and so that was part of the hypnotic, like suggestion. And she comes back and she's like, yeah, like, that's really made a difference. Now I still get a little nervous, but now all I can see is like Tweety bird, when I see a bird, like it's not quite so intimidating. And I thought, like it's good. I mean, it's kind of like in the same line of things. So, like it is a consistent, effort that when you're really struggling, because anxiety, just like any other kind of mental health condition, is a very, very real, it's a very, very real thing. And, kind of going back to, like our topic about if you're struggling with something like a mental health issue, depression or anxiety, is that starting over or is it starting something new? And my position is that it's actually starting something new, especially if you're going and seeking help or trying medication. I mean, that's all seeking something new. And everybody's story is just a little bit different depending on their clinical presentation. Sometimes, we talked about medication. Sometimes medication is, like part of that treatment plan. Therapy, talking, developing a support system, really being mindful of what your mind is saying in the situation and taking an opportunity to redirect and reflect it. So, but there's so many people are just like, it's more like, like it doesn't feel like it's starting over. But it really is. I mean, it's an opportunity to move forward.
Do you ever feel like you're too old to start something new? Like, do you ever like going back to school or something where you might be with someone of a different age group? Like, as you get older, have you felt that before? Like, I would totally do this, but I just feel like I'm too old. Like, it's too late. Like, do you ever have that feeling?
I'm going to defer that one to Lindsey before I answer that. What do you think, Lindsey?
All the time. I'm too old for most things at this point, but I actually had my nephew take me out on the jet ski this weekend, and he was like, do you want me to like hit jumps and stuff? And I was like, no, Luke, I'm too old for that. And he's like, I'm going to hit jumps. No, you're not. And he was right. I had so much fun, but I definitely thought I was far too old. So you might think you are, but it doesn't mean you are ever too old to start something new.
And that's a really good message, Lindsey, because I think that there's probably a lot of people that actually get stuck into that. No, like, I'm too old for that, or I shouldn't do that because, I don't know, I'm a mom or I'm a grandma, or I don't know. I mean, we always have something that we say to ourselves, true or not true, that might hold us back. But my answer to that question is, Emma, no, I don't think you're ever too old. Maybe there's a time when your body, kind of fizzles out and your options are limited. Like, I think that that's probably a true, like, time in which, like, well, it's going to be hard to try something new when you get to a certain age. But outside of that, no. I think that we should always challenge ourselves. And you guys know me. I mean, the audience knows me by now because there's always a story with me, right? I mean, I think that, every aspect of my life, I have a story that goes along with it. But when I was older, when I started working on my doctorate, because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I worked on my bachelor's, I worked for a couple of years, and then I went back and I worked on my master's, and I worked for a couple of years. And when I went to work on my doctorate, I kind of thought I was too old. Like I was in my mid 30s, and I didn't complete it until I was 42. And I just felt like going into that, I was too old. I should have been younger. And I'm so glad that I didn't pay attention to myself. And the other part of that is that by going through my doctorate program as I guess they would call it a non-traditional student, like I met a lot of people who had really, really highly decorated and successful careers, and they were older than I was. Like they had retired out, like from their careers, and they had time then to reinvent themselves into something that they were really interested in. Of course, I was working on my doctorate, and they were working on their doctorates, and I thought, good God, this is not fun. Anybody who's working on their doctorate, you know what I'm talking about. It is not an easy process. And yet I gave those people kudos, and it also helped me to feel better, like knowing that, really I wasn't too old. I mean, I wasn't the youngest one, but I wasn't the oldest one either. So like it was a really good experience for me to be a non-traditional student in my mid 30s and working on my doctorate.
I had this unique experience. My freshman year of college, I took a chemistry lab, and I walked in, and everybody kind of partnered up, and I'd gotten there like really late. So I was the last one. And there was one other person that didn't have a partner. And he was older. I would say he was probably in his 50s. So I didn't know if he was, a teacher or a para or, what his role was, but I sat next to him and he asked me if I had a partner yet. And I said, no, I don't. And I said, do you need one? And he said, yeah, I do. And he had a thick Russian accent. So I was already intrigued. I already want to know what the story was. But in the back of my mind, I was like, what are you doing in a entry-level freshman chemistry lab course, And after getting to know him, he was a professor of like advanced calculus or something crazy like that. And he was taking it for fun. And I was like, man, I wonder how many people are judging him for taking this course, thinking, all these things about him when he's the smartest guy in the room. And sorry. And thank God I had him as my partner, because he was like amazing. Like he saved my life, because I hate chemistry. I'm terrible at chemistry. And it just so happens that I had the smartest guy in the room as my partner. So I aced everything. Thank God. But it's just interesting because, I mean, I'm sure he went into it maybe a little bit nervous, and if he didn't show it. He was just there. He just wanted to learn more about it and just see what it would be like to take it. And it just kind of put things into perspective. Like it doesn't matter how old you are or where you're at or how smart or whatever. If you're interested in something, it's okay to seek that out. I mean, it doesn't really matter what everyone else thinks. So I thought about that. Like if I were to go do other things, like I could be like my Russian lab partner, just trying things out and seeing how it goes. Like you just never know.
I have a question for you guys. Have you ever stayed in something because you were afraid of starting something new?
Yeah, those previous 2 relationships I was talking about. Both of those.
Okay, yeah, fair.
Also, my job. Was the first job I ever got. I was there for 11 years before I finally left. So, yeah. It's hard. It's hard to change big parts of your life like that, but.
Well, let me ask you, did you stay there because you were afraid to do something different? That you were fearful that you weren't capable or that it wouldn't work out? I mean, what was driving that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, well, I was good at what I did and I didn't hate it, but also I was scared of trying something else and failing, not having any idea. I was scared of regretting my choice. I was scared of leaving and starting somewhere new and then being like, I should have never done that,
Yeah, I think so many people can get kind of caught up with that.
Yeah.
You're not alone. That's for sure.
Well, and that's why I go back to it's not going to be the end of the world. Just do it, because even had I switched jobs and hated where I switched to, you can switch again. It's okay. You're not stuck. So.
Yeah. For me, mine was in college. I chose to be an engineer first off because I wanted to make a lot of money and have a fancy title and all the things. And I took my first engineering class and I hated it. Like I knew immediately, I was like, nope, this is not what I want to be. So I was scrambling because you have to have a major. You have to have something if you're going to stay in college. So I kind of looked literally down the list of just like different majors that my college offered. And I was like, teaching. I was like, I like kids. I could probably do that. So that's just what I picked. And I learned a lot from it. But I think towards my senior year, I could already see myself like, I don't know if I could do this forever kind of thing. So it's like, but then like, I already changed once. I can't change again. Like there's this unspoken rule that you can't keep changing it around, even though it's not true. You can absolutely keep changing. But for me, I was like, I already switched once. I already redid everything. I'm almost done with college. I'm just going to finish out and, fake it till I make it. And I got my first teaching job. Well, I did several smaller like daycare jobs, and I really liked those. And I did my first teaching job, and I had a really tough class, like really tough. A lot of behaviors and a lot of kids that were just below where they should be, and it was really stressful. And I was like, man, I don't know if I could do this. Like I didn't like going to work every day. I love the kids, and it wasn't nothing against the kids. I just, in my heart of hearts, I just knew that if I stayed in that position, I just probably just wouldn't be happy. So I had to really make the decision of like, do I start over again? Do I start from zero? Do I, waste my degrees? Was this all for nothing? So yeah, it's hard when you're really young, when you're in your teens and 20s, trying to figure out exactly who you want to be and what you want to do in life. And you really don't know until you know, I think for a lot of people, but it's hard once you pick something and it doesn't, you don't fall in love with it like you thought you would. And that happens all the time.
That is true. And then, like, I don't know, my story was a little bit different because I thought I had a plan. And then I ended up, I mentioned this in another podcast, I ended up being a victim of a crime on a university campus. And I just couldn't get myself psychologically put together. And so my whole direction sort of changed. Like I was going to be a lawyer, judge, politician, like I was a pre-law student, like that's just really what I wanted to do. And so that was a very big game changer. I'm not saying that I became a psychologist, or a psychological provider, as a result of being a victim of a crime. That had nothing to do with it. That didn't happen until much later, and I'm not doing what I'm doing today because I was a victim of a crime. It's just an experience that I had. But, I didn't know for a while. I just didn't know. I mean, my whole world was invested in one thing, and I had one direction in mind. And, like that happened when I was 18 and a half years old. So I was pretty young when I had my first introduction of, like having, kind of the rug pulled out from underneath me and having to figure out what I wanted to do. And the whole interest in the field of psychology really didn't happen, until I was almost 30. I just was not, that was just not in my wheelhouse at that point in time. So consequently, going back and getting a master's in my it would have been my mid 30s, and then my doctorate in my 40s, and then opening up my clinic when I was in my later 40s, after I had graduated from that. I mean, like that's interesting how life takes us in different directions. Here's another question. What's something you would like to start now that you didn't have the courage or opportunity to start earlier?
I want to go back to school. Yeah. And well, I will, but my life's a little busy at the moment. So I think I want to actually go major in animal science so I could do something with like animal nutrition. it just opens up a lot of different job opportunities for me that are a little bit easier on my body, a little bit more flexible in schedule. I could work from home a lot more and still be doing something I love. So,
for me, I would invest in my financial life better. Like I'm really interested in getting like a financial advisor and learning more about like the stock market and IRAs, Roth IRAs, and just things like that. Like, because before it was just kind of like, make it, like pay the bills, put food on the table, put gas in your car. I mean, it's still kind of that way, but it's like, I mean, I'm at this point where like I said, I'm kind of building from my roots. So I'm trying to do some more adulting stuff, but all that stuff is like way over my head. So I would love to just really sit down with a financial advisor and really just start contributing to all these different things and start building that up. I don't know. It's a very scary thing, but that's what I would like to do.
get you a Roth IRA, and then
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
They'll pretty much just handle it from there too. Like,
awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm still young enough where I am not done. I think that I have these new ventures, like I have written a book. I'm working on my second one. Ooh, aren't you excited, Emma?
I'm so excited. So excited.
Still figuring out the first one, but starting work on the second one and doing the podcast. I'm so excited to see, where this goes, because I think that this really resonates, with a direction that I want, which is reaching out to people and helping them to live their best life, inspiring them to live their best life by talking about, just womanhood and some of the complexities, and encouraging and inviting, women to not give up or give in. I think we are incredible. We are an incredible entity, and so excited, that I am a part of, this thing called womanhood.
Wendy, do you think there's pressure for your age to like hurry up before you can't, like hurry up and do things before you can't? Like, because I know you said a lot of your people are thinking about retiring and moving to different places and settling down. Do you think there's pressure for you? Because you're not done yet, but do you think there's pressure for you to fit it all in, or like start new things, or do you feel like you kind of just can like live your life? I know where are you at with all that?
I don't know. That's a great question. I guess I never really thought about that. I think I'm just open to seeing kind of where life takes me, and I'm just going to take it in, because I just really fundamentally don't know where I want to land or what I want it to be like. You talked about earlier, you asked me a question about, my business, I definitely have a business, but I'm hoping that the business will continue to expand and grow, like having the opportunity to bring more therapists in so that it doesn't end when I end, because I really believe in the importance of mental health and mental wellness and what it is that therapy has to offer people. But I also love this idea of kind of the freedom and the fun of being able to reach out to people in a different way. And so, who knows where that's going to take me? I mean, with establishing a clinic, I can also always open up a clinic in any other place that I want to, and just hire people along the way. And I say that, this is a lot of work. You certainly see organizations that do that. There's big organizations that are almost nationwide, like clinics. They're not always just local. And so, there might be, because I don't ever see myself wanting to not work in that capacity, because I love working with patients and helping them to get through whatever struggle they're going through. That's, that's just a huge passion of mine. And that's a big motivation as to why I even opened up my own clinic in the first place. But
well, I don't know about Emma, but I definitely feel like I have to start hurrying up with things now. Like Brian and I talked about having another kid, and I'm like, but I'm 35. We're running out of time. So if we're going to do it, we need to do it. And not just that, but I mean, there's other things that I'm like, I'm getting older. I need to get this stuff done.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I asked Wendy too, is because I also feel that pressure of like, hurry up now before it's too late. I feel like I hear all the time, and maybe a lot of other people do too, but it's like, do it now while you're young and while your back doesn't hurt and while you can still move around and while, like you always get all these threats from older people. I feel like maybe not threats, but like just heads up. So I've always like feared aging a little bit because of that, because you always hear all the negatives about it and like, your body and all the things. And it's just like, okay, I have to fit it all in right now before everything just like everybody says that before it all goes bad. So I hope it's not, not all like that. It's probably more mainly in my head, but yeah, I feel the same, Lindsey, just like hurry up and just, I'm getting old. Like I gotta get going, even though I'm only 25, I feel like I'm getting old, it's hard.
I wonder if, like that is part of just some of the messages that women have received, over the decades and the years, that there's only a certain amount of time. Because I remember feeling that same pressure too. And especially, like when I went through my divorces and I was literally starting over, that, like all of a sudden, like I was going to be behind times, like, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and catch up. But, life has its own pace. And okay, fine. Like I sit with patients all day long and yes, I mean, my knees hurt a little bit more and my back is a little bit more strained, but I'm still very, very capable of doing things. So like maybe it's not necessarily, it really shouldn't necessarily be about age and what you have to do in a certain time, because realistically we're living longer. And if you want to have a baby at 35 or 36, like there are people that are having babies when they're in their 50s or 40s and they're having their first kids, like they're just starting that era of their life, and so I get it and I understand the pressure. But if I were to say something to, like a younger generation, it's like, don't put that pressure on yourself because then you don't enjoy things. I think it's always good to have a goal and to have, like a vision. Maybe it's going to work out, which is kind of like the interesting part about our topic today, because it's about starting over or starting a new chapter. You don't know what those chapters are going to be like, but like sometimes those chapters can be better than you ever expected them to be, as long as you're open to that process and you don't put that pressure on yourself so much. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of my way in.
No, it's refreshing to hear. I feel like maybe women in general, maybe more than men, I don't know. Just there's a big culture of like fear of aging. That's why we invest so much money or marketing. We're marketed to with all these skincare products and all these wellness and yoga and Pilates, like all the things to keep you looking young. So I think from a young age, a lot of little girls are just too scared to grow up and too scared to age, because you see all these things that aging is so bad. So it's really refreshing, Wendy, to hear you say like, I'm doing fine, like I'm capable, like I don't care, like, let it happen. It's refreshing to hear it because it's, I don't know. Like I said, from a young age, you're taught that. So it's nice to hear someone say it's not so bad.
Well, I think you have to also understand your limitations because, okay, Emma, a few months ago, you and Steven were moving into your apartment and some of that furniture like kicked my ass. Like your mom and I were like, it took us a few days to recover. Like we were over there lifting, Steven's big barbells and weights. And I was sitting here going, what the hell were we thinking when we were doing that? But we did it anyway. And so, like there are some things fundamentally that I would not be able to do at my age versus when I was 20. And I have to learn to appreciate and respect that. But if I take care of my body, like there's still like plenty of time, to do things. We shared on the last podcast. I mean, I'm learning how to fly a plane for Pete's sake, and I didn't even think about that until I was in my 50s. Well, I didn't put it into action, but I don't think I was in the position to financially be able to open up that opportunity for myself either, because learning how to fly is, you know, a little bit of an expensive hobby or venture in within itself. So
I've also got one more question for you,
yeah.
Wendy, while I'm thinking about it, while it's in my brain.
Okay. All right.
Because I've heard people say this. Is it better to spend your money when you're young and all the things, or save up your money for when you're older? Because I've heard people say both sides. Like, you're young, spend what you have a good time, you know, do it. And then I've heard other people say, like, be really careful, save up what you have, invest. So there's two completely different sides of this coin of, you know, spend it now while you're young, or save for your future. What would you recommend being in your 50s, where you're at in life? What would you, if you could go back, you know, what would you recommend?
I think my answer is you got to find the balance. I think it's about spending money and having time and having, you know, like having these adventures in your life. But I also think that with the way the world is right now, because my generation, I believe, was the first generation where I remember hearing when I was your age, you know, like there's not going to be any Social Security, you know, like when it's time for you to retire. And that is at 20, that was scary as hell, you know? And so, you know, like there was this big push, you know, like for needing to figure it out. But the reality of the situation is that in my 20s, I was living paycheck to paycheck, like so many people are. And I was also rebuilding a life two times around. So, you know, like, I think I was doing pretty good for myself. I was surviving financially. And there, I didn't really have much of an opportunity to start thinking about saving. But then, you know, like, you know, you hear so many of these things. I mean, social media, we've talked about social media before. It's so accessible. And you hear so many things, you know, like, oh, there's people that, you know, are investing money and they're like your age, Lindsey, and they're millionaires and they are not working. And it's like, wow, that is really impressive. How did I screw up my life where I couldn't be that person? But I've also been in nursing homes too, where this is a generation that saved and saved and saved. And for whatever reason, their health, you know, like kind of, you know, betrayed them, and they ended up in long-term care, and everything, you know, like that they built, homes, cars, possessions, money, it was all seized, and it goes to the nursing home as a spend down, you know, like, because nobody can afford, you know, that kind of, or a lot of people can't afford that kind of care. And so if you don't protect your money, which who knows what that's looks like now, because every time I hear about, you know, like trust funds or getting things out of your name, you know, like, and putting in the names of your children. I mean, you know, like there's so many different things that you hear, and yet it doesn't necessarily mean that things are protected. So I really don't know, you know, like, I think you want to have enough to live so that you can live comfortably and not have to worry about it. But, you know, this idea of trying to save, do without today, you know, for saving for tomorrow, I'm not really sure I personally buy into that, but that's just me. I don't think that is something that is right for everybody. I think everybody should make their own choice. I mean, Lindsey, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, first, I think this is where we should add in a disclaimer that nothing we have said on this episode or any other episodes is financial or medical advice. It's just
That's
our
true.
opinions.
Yeah, right.
Yes,
Yeah.
accurate.
But I kind of agree with you, Wendy. It's so hard to say, like, you want to save some money, but I really feel like that can't just be your whole focus. Like, you got to spend some of it too. Otherwise, what was the point? What were you working for?
Mm-hmm.
You were working for it just to bury yourself? Because that's not any fun.
No,
so
I
try
really
to do
think
both. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like I tell the kids, you know, like, hey, we went on a vacation. Some of it ended up being, you know, like a way to, you know, like advertise ages and stages, by the way. But the other part of it is that it's important for me to spend some of my money with experience, you know, like as I'm young enough to be able to enjoy my adult children and, you know, like my grandbabies, my grandsons, my granddaughters, you know, like my adult children. To me, that is like priceless. You know, not that I can do that all the time, you know, but this, like it was really important for me to be able to, I didn't fund the whole thing. I just, helped out, and offset some of the costs so that, like my adult children and my grandchildren could have, like a fun, interactive experience, but yeah. And I like to travel, like I think I've worked hard in my whole life, like I don't want to not travel and have fun and hang out with my friends and family. But that's me.
I don't think a lot of people give the experiences thing enough credit either. Like with Tara, I've told all the family, I'm like, that's what she wants for birthdays and Christmases, is experiences, like not toys. Get her a zoo pass, get her movie theater gift cards, things she can go do or you can take her to do, versus just a bunch of junk that's going to get played with maybe once, so then, thrown away or donated, or, kids they don't touch half the stuff they have ever.
Mm-hmm.
With
well,
the older
adults don't
kids,
either, by the way.
Well, like the older kids when they were younger, man, they had so much stuff that I mean, it would be brand new toys that they just never touched, never looked at. It just sat there. But then we'd try to get rid of it and they'd lose it. They just wanted to hoard all the stuff. So I don't know. I think it's just better to get experiences over material.
Hey, I agree with that. But I don't even know. Maybe that's just, like a newer way of thinking of things, because there's a certain way that I grew up and that I raised that things are supposed to be the way that they are. Like, for example, Christmas, like spending a lot of money at Christmas and getting everybody gifts. I mean, it's fun to do gifts, but my family's getting bigger. So, like we do grab bags and we do games and we do different kinds of things. And I think that that's a little bit more personable and fun and meaningful than it is to, try to painstakingly think about everybody in your family and get them something special and unique that they may or may not like. And then the heartache knowing that they probably returned it. I had a patient that, talked to me the other day about how hurt she was because she really goes above and beyond, like getting gifts for her family. And then she found out in a horrible way through her hairdresser that happened to know a family member that, why does she do that? Because they just returned the gifts anyway. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know. I felt so bad, I felt so bad for that patient, just because I'm trained doesn't always know, it doesn't mean that I always know, what to say to somebody that has, with something that is so devastating. But I was just like, in my head, I was sitting here thinking, that's why I do experiences. And I think that my grandkids, because they're the younger generation, and I have one that's 13 and one that's 10 right now, almost 11. I think that they really appreciate those experiences. And I hope my young ones, are going to follow suit with that they're just like, yeah, those experiences.
Definitely. This is a little off topic, but I have a question for both of you.
Okay.
Do you believe in the 5 love languages? We're talking about gift giving and things like that. Do you believe in that? Do you really?
Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, that has actually been researched. It is scientifically. Okay. That's right. I mean, it has been scientifically researched. However, the problem with the field of research, science, psychology, even, totally interesting, but it's not interesting if you're kind of trained in the field. Motivational speakers will take that and then they'll add their own spin and that's interesting, invigorating. People eat that stuff up, but it all comes from research from psychology. So that's an absolute truth. 5 love languages. We all have them. So let's do something fun. Okay. So there's 5 love languages. There's gifts, acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, and physical touch. Okay. So physical touch, when I work with patients, it's not just sex. It's, like any kind of physical touch. It could be hugs. It could be, hand holding. It could be, it can be a lot of different things. Physical touch is a very wide spectrum. So what would be your number one, Lindsey?
Mine's words of affirmation.
Okay.
Brian is physical touch.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And T also has a primary love language. What is T's? I think T's is...
Hers is probably physical touch.
I was thinking that too. Like
Yep.
she's a little standoffish, but when she warms up to you, like I noticed that when we were on vacation, like she would always, like she would kiss me and then she put it on her kiss on my forehead.
Yep. Lucky
that was at the beginning. Yeah.
Physical touch is the opposite of my love language, but it's my partner and my daughter's love language.
Yeah. Yeah. So words of affirmation. Yeah. Okay, Emma, what's yours?
I think it's the exact same. I think I prefer to receive words of affirmation, and I give love by words of affirmation. And my fiance is physical touch for sure. My son, though, I don't know. He's not a very big touchy-feely kiddo, but he likes to be talked to. So I think his is also words of affirmation. If I had to guess, I mean, he's still pretty little, but that's my best guess. I don't know.
Well, Steven's actually is probably, physical touch, I could see where you would say that, but I think his primary is actually acts of service.
To give or receive for him?
To give.
Yeah, that's a big one for him too. That's definitely up there.
Yeah.
And mine too. Mine hand in hand as words of affirmation, and quality time is a big one for me too. Mm. That one's pretty important to me. So I have a couple of big ones. What about you, Wendy?
Mine for giving is acts of service. Sorry, I forgot to add the giving. I like to receive words of affirmation. I give acts of service.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you see, it has, like a scientific fundamental basis, and a lot of people just, like discount that. And it's so important, especially when you're in a relationship, like with your children. So for example, like one of the things that will probably speak louder than words, like to Stephen, is if I would come and do something for him. Like I would be like the best mom in the universe, like I've known that, like I can do something little, like go and make his bed, or, I helped, like take care of AJ on the vacation. That was good for you, both of you, but for Stephen, that was like huge, because that was acts of service, like I was doing it because I wanted to. Ryan he's a big, he is a big, physical touch guy. He's always been, like a hugger, like you just, you just give him a hug, and that's like the top of his world. Like that's from a mom's perspective. Belaine, my oldest son, I would say that my oldest son is really good at words of affirmation and quality time. Like those are just his big things. Holly, is a big gift giver. That's her love language. Like for me, it's quality time. For Todd, it's physical touch. Physical touch is very important to me. It's my number 2, but quality time is my number 1. So it's always fun, like to work with couples, and sometimes even individuals therapeutically, and bring in love languages and help them to be able to really understand how that really helps speak a different kind of language, like it builds you up in a way that is beyond words. If you can really recognize that and understand yourself and another person. So
yeah, sometimes I have to remember, I'm like, okay, like this is how I, like I'll tell Stephen, like I'll give him words of affirmation, because that's what I'm looking for. I'll be like, oh, you look so good today, and I hope you had a great day at work, and let's, I want to chit chat. And he's just like, okay, whatever. And as soon as, like, yeah. As soon as I do something, or I make a mix up or whatever. And he like brains. So I'm just like, like, so sometimes I have to remind myself like, oh yeah, he's, this is his love language and not mine. So sometimes you have to remember that it's, doesn't have to be the same, but yeah, it's kind of funny how those things work. I don't know. I kind of forgot about them, but they're definitely valid. I mean, they're definitely real, but it's, I don't know. Cool that there's merit. I didn't know there was research behind it. That is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I think the research was actually put out by Johnson and Johnson, which is very surprising because Johnson and Johnson has put out a lot of really great research over the years, like pertaining to relationships and love languages and different kinds of things like that. It's something to invite the audience to think about as far as starting something new, right? Like starting something new and think in terms of the importance and what we get out of, like something like thinking in terms of love languages and how that can enhance our own personal lives and help enhance our relationships that we're in with our whatever relationship, friendships or significant relationships, our relationships with our children, all of that, like becomes really, really important. It's just my thought, anyhow. Let's see. I have one thing. I think that this is kind of interesting. If you were to think about life as a book, and a book has many chapters, like mine has 12, the one that I just wrote, like 12 chapters. Do we throw away, like the entire book because we finish one chapter and it just doesn't, work for us? Or do we turn the page? Or do we try and, like see what happens? Maybe, like one chapter didn't really resonate with us, but we continue to turn the page and read. And then we find out, I'm so glad that I continued to read that book. So if we took a look at our own life as being a book, how would that change our perspective? Would it change your perspective, Emma?
Well, I know there's been times in my life where I'm just like, throw the whole damn book away. Like sometimes you really just want to throw it all away and start over. You want to burn the book, you want to throw it in a dumpster, and you want to rip it to shreds, and you just want to start all the way over. But
which is starting over. Yes, you're right. Yeah.
Which is starting over. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for my life as a book, I mean, even though I've had those moments, my story as a whole has been a really good one. And I'm glad it's still going. I'm glad the pages are still turning in every chapter, every side story, every villain, every hero. Well, all the things in my story were necessary to where I am. I'm a big believer in that. I mean, my life's been pretty crazy up until this point, but I think it's all worth it. I think it's all shaped me to the person I am. So that's my book. My book is ongoing, and I'm grateful for all the chapters, even though I hate some of them, but part of it.
Well, that's probably all of us. Okay, Lindsey, what about you?
I think my reaction to my book would be, wow, she was really mean to herself for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right there. Sorry, baby. Yeah. Things got better after I stopped being so mean to myself. So the book definitely gets better with every chapter.
Are you looking forward to chapters that haven't been written yet?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
They, like I said, they just keep getting better. So I expect that to continue. I hope that continues.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like even if, like a chapter that hasn't been written yet doesn't quite, like fit in line with what we want. I mean, like going back to some of the things that we talked about earlier, like my thing about being stronger than what you know yourself to be, like it can still be a beautiful book, even if it has complicated chapters too. And lots of lessons like you talked about and lots of things that you've learned, like along the way and giving yourself some grace, which is what you talked about, like Lindsey earlier today. So Anyway, our lives are like books, and each book has a chapter, and we certainly have a lot of chapters in our lives, and again, it's kind of a constellation of good, bad, and indifferent. But it is the story of our life. So, like, I hope that our audience can think in terms of their book and their chapters, and, like thinking in terms of the start overs and the start ups in life, and be encouraged and invited to provide themselves with grace, provide themselves, like with an opportunity to do some reflection, and realize that we learn a lot. There's lots of lessons to be learned, and that we are stronger than what we know ourselves to be. So I think that's one of the greatest things that we can give ourselves is permission to change. Maybe you're not starting over. Maybe you're not behind. Maybe you didn't waste those years. Like sometimes I think we get caught up into some of that negative thinking. Maybe everything that you've experienced has been preparing you for that next chapter. So whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, or beyond, remember this. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed, like to change your direction, no matter what the age is. And you are allowed to discover something new about yourself. And you are never too old to begin another chapter. So, Emma, do you want to, take us the rest of the way home? Or Lindsey?
Sure. I just want to say to our audience, thank you for sticking with us. We're still getting the hang of this podcast thing, but we really enjoy coming out here and talking about life and real situations, real conversations. We've gotten a lot of support from our local community, me and Wendy's, and from people around the world and around the country who have shown us a lot of support. So thank you so much. We recognize you, and we love to be here and be a part of this. So have a great week, everyone. We're so excited to see you next Saturday, and have a wonderful time. And thanks for tuning in this week.
Lindsey, do you have any parting words? Oh,
thanks for bearing with us. I'm doing my best here with a Velcro toddler, so it's probably really loud on my end during some of my parts of the conversation, but we're getting through it.
absolutely. And I love the fact that you guys are sticking with this, and that we are out there inspiring people to live their best lives. So until the next time, everybody, find balance, find joy, and live your best life.
Thanks for spending this time with us on Ages and Stages. If this conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend who might need it too. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can follow us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube for more behind-the-scenes moment and updates between episodes. Wherever you are in life, your stage matters, and we're so glad you're here. We'll see you next time.